So, to begin with today's session, so far we have covered the important elements in business analysis from a strategic standpoint. So, if you see the business analysis knowledge area, there are around 6 knowledge areas in business analysis. One is your strategy analysis, or sometimes it is also called as enterprise analysis. So far what we have covered, the request for proposal or the business case or the process standpoint, the frameworks, they are all part of your strategy analysis knowledge area and business analysis. Now today we are starting with requirement analysis and design. So today onward, whatever we would be covering for next 4 to 5 sessions, they would deal with the requirement analysis and design knowledge area. So this is something wherein all your junior business analyst or the associate business analyst, they are involved heavily. Now this is the knowledge area that we covered so far, wherein all your senior level consultants are involved heavily. Then there is a knowledge area called as business analysis, planning and monitoring. Now what happens in business analysis, planning and monitoring? We essentially devise the plan, like a project manager creates a project plan. So similarly, business analysts are also supposed to create a certain specific plan and constantly keep on monitoring their plan. So that is something we are going to cover in a later session. Then we have something called as requirements lifecycle management. So all your tracing and versioning of the requirement, they are done in requirement lifecycle management. Like the day you start eliciting a particular requirement till the day the requirement is retired from the system, it needs to be constantly traced, tracked and monitored. So we are essentially managing the life cycle of the requirement. Then comes the knowledge area, solution assessment and evaluation. Now what happens in solution assessment and evaluation is like whatever requirement you have gathered and whatever the system has been implemented, you verify and validate whether they both are in sync or not. The requirement that you have gathered and what it has been implemented by the developer. So this essentially happens in your UAT phase, wherein your business analyst sits with the customer and do all the requirement assessment and validation. Now there is something called as elicitation and collaboration. Now elicitation and collaboration is not a phase as such in business analysis, but it's an ongoing activity that is constantly done throughout these particular phases or areas in business analysis. Now at a given point of time, you may experience all of these things, or you may experience only selective part of these things. Now there's a reason why you may not experience all of these things, because let's say you are working as a business analyst in a testing project, a quality assurance project. So you would only be dealing with requirement lifecycle management and solution assessment and evaluation. These three things won't come into the picture. Let's say you are dealing with a new product development. So you are bound to deal with all of these 6 knowledge areas. Let's say you are only responsible for writing the requirement. Okay, only your analysis phase comes to your company. The outsourcing company has only outsourced you the analysis or consulting phase of the project, not the development phase and testing phase. In that case, you would only experience these 4 areas. So this way, depending on the situation of the project, depending on the nature of the project, you may experience all of this, or you may experience them in a selective way, depending on the nature of the contract. But in our program, we would touch base with all this knowledge area. So today we are focusing on requirement analysis and design in conjunction with elicitation and collaboration. So these are the essential 6 knowledge area that exist in business analysis. To summarize, this is our agenda for today. We would identify core elements of business analysis. We would identify need for requirement elicitation. We would understand requirements elicitation process. We would understand what are requirement attributes and what are requirement properties. We would touch base with requirements management. Then we would understand how and when the requirements are originated. Then we would see how to categorize the requirement, then what are the phases in requirement elicitation, what is the requirement writing approaches. We would also look at a software requirement specification, a sample software requirement specification, and a template for it. Then we would understand what are the important characteristics of software requirement specification, what are the contents in software requirement specification, and we would see some of the techniques that are heavily used in requirement elicitation process. So this is what we are going to cover in today's session. Now we would first start to understand what are the core elements of business analysis. Now, when we say business analysis, let's say you join a particular organization as a fresher or as a entry-level business analysis or aspiring business analyst for that matter, anything. So what is the start of your work? How do you approach towards your business analysis activity? So let us understand with the help of a very simple example. Now let's say everyone who is with their family, let's say we have a example of a family wherein we have a mom, dad, and a son. Now in this particular family, we have three stakeholders: the dad, the mom, and son. Think it from this particular perspective. We would relate it with to the business analysis process. Now what happens? Every morning they need a cup of tea. So that is their requirement. So here the stakeholders are dad, mom, and son, and the requirement is to prepare a cup of tea. Now, in order to prepare a cup of tea, you need certain inputs like water, sugar, milk, ginger, and so on to prepare the particular cup of tea. So those are called as inputs in business analysis. Now, once you got all the inputs, there is a tea making process involved. So consider this process and relate it to the system. What system would execute after getting the necessary inputs? And after we have executed the certain steps or certain processes, we get the final end result, which is called as output. That is the cup of tea. And then there is an effort, which is preparation. The process, the effort needed to collect the inputs from different stakeholders, they are tracked as effort. And finally, we deliver that cup of tea to the respective stakeholder. So here, if you see the stakeholder, dad, mom, and son, they gives their needs and requirement. What is their need and requirement is a cup of tea. Now, stakeholder mom does all the analysis and development. Why development? Because she is preparing that particular tea or she is processing that particular tea. And after all have been completed, the stakeholders, they get themselves a cup of tea. So they essentially get the delivery. In software requirement engineering world, you would essentially deal with all these things: the inputs, the process, the output, the effort, the stakeholder, and the requirements. Now, requirements are nothing but your need, what you want out of the system. What is your requirement that you need to capture in order to build a system? Stakeholder are the person who would give you the requirement. It could be anyone. It could be your external stakeholder. It can come from an internal stakeholder as well. So depending on the nature of stakeholder, they would give their requirements or specify their needs. And as a business analyst, we have to work closely with the stakeholder, understand their requirement, and then we have to understand what are the inputs that we would be needing in order to process or in order to create a process in and around a particular requirement, like how we should process that particular requirement. And then we have to capture the end result in terms of output, and the entire thing, right from interacting with the stakeholder till specifying the requirement till collecting the inputs till writing the processes and writing the outputs or the acceptance criteria, are tracked under effort. So all these activities would be coming as effort. Now this was a simple example. Now let us map it with a regular example. Now let's say our need or our requirement is to build a HR management system. Now when we say HR management system, who all stakeholder could be part of HR management system? Any thoughts?
Uh, First of all, like the team leader or the head of the HR department.
Okay, or I can say it as HR head.
Yeah.
Then,
Uh, and someone from the management. I'm not sure which position it will be, but someone from the management so that he can exactly tell the criteria like what is required.
okay,
Uh, these are the only two I'm able to figure out right now.
okay. What about the candidates? They would also be part of the HR management system.
Oh, okay. As in the employees.
No, the candidate whose information the HR team would be processing, the
Right,
job
right.
seekers.
Okay. Yeah, right, right, right. They will also be there.
What about the hiring managers who would be giving the requirement to the HR for their project needs? Okay, let us just consider these four set of stakeholders. Now our need is to build a HR management system, and we have identified our stakeholder: HR head, HR manager, candidates, hiring manager. Now it's time to first build a process. Now what is the process? The process is like, what is the steps that we would be needing in our particular system, or in other words you can say a workflow. Now if we consider a process, we would first start with obtaining requirement from the hiring manager. Now the HR, or I would say, get requirements from the hiring manager. Now the hiring manager says that okay, in my particular project I would be needing 2 candidates for Informatica. So that is the requirement your hiring manager gave to your HR. Now after taking that particular requirement, what's the next process according to you? She would feed the requirements into the system, and this system could be Taleo, SuccessFactors, any HR management system, and create a position which is visible to the outside world. For example, if a vacancy is created in any of this portal, that is visible to the outside world. That is the next step. Now what is the third step? Candidate views and applies for the position in that particular HR management system. Let's say she has feeded a requirement for Informatica. After getting the requirement from hiring manager, the HR manager then feeds the requirement into the system and creates a position. Now people like you and me, they seize this requirement and they start applying for that particular position. This is the third process. Now what should be the fourth process?
Shortlisting the applicants.
Yes. Sourcing, screening, or shortlisting the candidates. That is the fourth process in this particular HR management system. After that, no, first it would be sourcing and screening. Next, it would be shortlisting the candidates. After shortlisting of candidates, your interview is scheduled. Okay. After that interview is scheduled, the let's say there are two processes over here. If once the interview is scheduled, one process is if interview was successful, And the second process is if interview was not successful. So there are two possibilities after scheduling the interview. So let us name it as 06.A if interview was successful, and let us name it as 06.B if interview was not successful. Now if interview was not successful, or I would write it as this way: if interview was not successful, the process ends there. Now what if the interview is successful? So if the interview is successful, we would write it as go to step 7. Okay, now what would happen if the interview was successful? So essentially the second round of interview would be scheduled, or senior manager interview would be scheduled. Now after that senior management interview is scheduled, again there are two possibilities: if interview was successful, if interview was not successful. So if interview was successful, it would go to step 9, and if interview was not successful, the process would end over there. Now after that, in step 9, HR manager would release offer. Now step 10 is candidate verifies the offer. Now there are two possibilities after candidate verifies the offer. The possibilities are 11 step: if candidate accepts the offer, then it would go to step 12. The second possibility is if candidate rejects the offer. So the process ends there. So there could be a renegotiation process as well, but we will keep it short and simple. Now in 12th step, what happens? A joining date is issued or confirmed. Now the process doesn't end here after the joining date is confirmed. After that, candidate onboard the company. 14th, payroll and other HR information created for the candidate in the system. And eventually, this is where the final process ends here. Now this is where the HR management process ends, but what's the next process starts? Payroll management system process starts from here, because HR management process was to onboard the candidate and bring into their payroll. Thereon, the next system would be the payroll management system that would take care of the candidate's need thereon. Now in this process, we identified the need, the stakeholder, the processes by which the particular stakeholder would interact in that particular system. Now, what about the inputs and outputs? So what do you think could be inputs in this particular process? There are many inputs we could see over here. Can someone identify what are the inputs? Correct. Profiles for candidates, score of candidates, hiring manager comments, feedback. This all can serve as inputs. So these are indicative list of input. There are many other inputs also available over there. Now what are the outputs? See, output cannot be, uh, uh, I mean, in most of the cases, it is not in equal number as compared to input. It would be the end goal, what you are trying to achieve. So here there is an end goal throughout this process. Can anyone identify what is that end goal, which would be considered as output?
Successfully hiring a candidate.
Yes, hiring a particular candidate. So that was our ultimate end goal throughout this process. So that is an output for this particular system. Now the time taken to execute all this thing would come as your effort. Now this effort could be 2 months, 3 months, depending on how much time it takes to close that particular position. So we as a business analyst, effort is something that is an ongoing activity that we need to track, but we have to focus on needs, requirement, who are the stakeholders from whom we would get the requirement, and how the stakeholder would interact in that particular system. For example, we would be getting requirement from hiring manager. Candidate views and applies for the position. Now the profiles are sourced and screened from that particular system itself. We shortlist the candidate from that particular system itself. Then we talk about the inputs, the processes, how this thing would work, how this input would be brought into usage throughout this process, how the stakeholder would be interacting with the system during this particular steps or the particular processes, and what is the final output we would be getting. That is something we would be describing in our requirement when it comes to writing requirements or understanding our business analysis profession. So this is the basics how you think about writing a particular requirement or understanding a given situation at the first place. Given situation as in given needs. Once you understand the situation, the need, what it is expected, who are the people who would be interacting with the system, what are the necessary sets of information we would be needing, and what is our end goal, we should be good enough to proceed further. Any questions, anyone? Okay. Now, like I said, we need to first understand the need for requirement elicitation. Now, how do we identify the need for a requirement? We need to conduct a thorough need analysis. Now, what is a need analysis? It focuses, like we saw in just in our example, we thoroughly understood what the person situation is. I mean, what is the need of the HR management system? Who would be interacting with that particular system? How the interaction should happen? So we created a step-by-step process flow wherein we put some if-else condition as well. If this doesn't happen, the process ends there. If this happens, then it would move to the next process. So we need to think logically from that particular perspective. How do we interact with the system, and what ways we can implement that particular system, how people would um, um, get the desired outcome out of that system. So that is something part of your need analysis that we just did. So we can identify the customer's needs by 3 ways: client request, modification of an existing system, or generation of new product. So like I said, in any IT industry project you consider, the nature of the project would typically fall into any one of these categories. Like it would be a new product development project wherein you would be developing the product right from the scratch, or it would be a modification of an existing system wherein the system is already built. You are just modifying some features of that particular system. And then there would be change request or client request wherein some new addition has to be done to the system. So what's the difference between modification and addition to the system? Any ideas?
Modification will be like changing a particular thing that was already there,
Mm-hmm.
and addition will be like adding something new.
Yes, absolutely. So modification is like you can alter some of the functionality which was already present in the system. In other words, if you consider the refactoring is also called as modification to the system, wherein the functionality remains the same, but you modify the code in order to better optimize the system. So that is also one way of modifying the system. And change request or client request is like you are adding something new to the feature in addition to the existing list of features that are available in that particular system. Now we'll start with our requirement elicitation. Now when I say requirement elicitation, it is more about researching and discovering the requirement from users, customer, or stakeholders. So before writing the actual requirement, we need to first understand the requirement. So what essentially happens is like the business people or the customer or the outsourcing company, they do not give concrete requirement to the vendor company. They would give you 10-15 lines, and basis on that you have to make an assumption, you have to do all your research, you have to discover the requirements in and around basis on the past projects that exist in your organization or that has been executed within in your organization, or for that matter if there are any ongoing projects of similar nature in your floor, in your bay, within that particular organization. So you have to reach out to different stakeholder a lot. Why? Because customer do not give their requirement uh, in a what I would say, in a subjective manner. They give it in a way which is at a very high level. I mean, it is some vision statement, you can say, some requirements in sort of vision statement. Now as a business analyst, we have to not only understand their requirement, we have to also create the necessary artifacts like your business requirement document or software requirement specification, or the designing artifacts like UML, UI screen, prototypes, then use cases. We have to develop all these things. So in order to do that, requirement elicitation is a process or is a phase which is there for our rescue. So this is the phase which takes maximum amount of time in any project, typically 1 to 2 months if the nature of the project is very small, or 3 to 4 months if the nature of the project is complex. And this is the phase wherein we do constant interaction with the customer as in the outsourcing company or the business, and try to understand what is their actual need is. We do a need analysis, we do write different business cases in that particular phase, we explain them what are the requirements that we have understood from your needs. So these are the activities that you do. Now after that, a phase follows called as requirement gathering. Now, this is the phase wherein we start writing the actual requirement. Elicitation phase is wherein we conduct meetings extensively. We only conduct meetings and meetings, and all the outcomes of those meetings we document in minutes of meeting or keep it somewhere from where we refer it while writing requirements in requirement gathering phase. So if someone asks you what's the difference between requirement elicitation and requirement gathering, so in requirement elicitation phase, the results are always unconfirmed. And in requirement gathering phase, the results are always confirmed. Now, what is the meaning of unconfirmed and confirmed? Is like whenever you are eliciting a particular requirement, you are just taking notes of that particular requirement. You don't send it out for formal approval from business stakeholder. But when you start actually specifying those minutes of meeting notes into actual requirement and create the specification documents like BRD or FRD or any requirement design document, then is something you need to gain an official approval from the business. Now that official approval is termed as confirmed. So that's the reason why it is called as the outcome of requirement elicitation are always unconfirmed and the outcome of requirement gathering are always confirmed. Now what comes first in project? It's very obvious. Requirement elicitation comes first in the particular project, followed by requirement gathering. And requirement gathering is followed by requirement analysis, and requirement analysis is followed by requirement design. So these are the essential phases in a typical project. Now, like we saw, requirements refer to what is necessary. It is a some quality or performance demand of a person in accordance with the need. We did the need analysis of different stakeholder, and after performing need analysis, we got our final requirement, which we documented. Now, this requirement, if you consider, there are various categories in particular requirement analysis or requirement elicitation. So we first have the project requirement. If you see the requirement ID, requirement name, description, category, notes, these are all called as project requirement. The login requirement or the payment requirement. This is specific to your project. A condition or task that must be completed to ensure the success or completion of the project. So project requirement are something that is exclusive to your project. They won't be used anywhere else. It is specific to that particular system. In our case, we built an HR management system. So we have a requirement list for HR management system. Can we use it in banking system or insurance system? No. These requirements are something which is specific to that project and specific to that particular industry. Now, what's the difference between requirement attributes and requirement properties? So when we write the requirement, there are two things that needs to be considered. One is the requirement attributes and second is requirement properties. Now, if you consider the requirement attributes, they are unique in nature. Unique in nature means we have to write the requirement in this particular fashion. Like every requirement would be having a unique ID associated to it. The date created, what is the version of that requirement, who is the author of the requirement, whom the requirement is assigned to, what is the status of the requirement, what is the priority of the requirement, and what is the complexity, difficulty, risk, and what is the due date of that particular requirement. So these are the fields that you would find in any requirement management system, maybe Jira, TFS, or any XYZ system. You would be finding these IDs by which you can create a filter or search a particular requirement or do any XYZ stuff. So in requirements management world, these are called as attributes. So in our earlier example, this requirement ID, requirement name, description, category, notes are nothing but your requirement attributes. And under requirement attributes would be your requirements, actual requirement. Now then, what are requirement properties? So if you consider requirement properties or characteristics, it is the process or method by which we write the requirement. Okay, so if you consider a particular requirement, you write a particular requirement, it has to mandatorily follow these particular criterions, that is the properties or the characteristics. Firstly, the requirement has to be complete. You cannot write incomplete requirement and say my requirement gathering is done. It has to be always complete. Then the requirement has to be accurate. Accurate as in, if you are saying that the UI must be what I would say, okay, we would be using material design for our application. Now what is material design? So material design is something not very clear. It is unambiguous, at the same time it is not accurate as well. So you need to specify what you need in material design UI. So material design UI has different components associated to it. They have their own different toolkit that needs to be deployed when you are designing a particular application with the help of material design. So you have to specify. So your requirement has to be complete, it has to be accurate, it has to be unambiguous, and it has to be testable. Testable as in, if you are writing a requirement like what I would say, the UI must be intuitive. Now, in this intuitive word, is the requirement testable? No. Intuitive has different perception to different stakeholders in their thought process. So you have to clearly specify that the UI screen width, height, the UI screen's elements placement like text boxes or the labels or the drop downs or the combo box. You have to specify what values can be entered in the drop down, what is the maximum number of characters you can enter in that particular text boxes, what are the validation that you have done for a phone number field, what are the validation you have done for the email address field. So it has to be testable. So you have to write requirement in that context. Now next comes your feasible. Feasible is like, you don't write any requirement which is not feasible to implement. Now what are the requirements which are not feasible to implement? Typically the non-functional requirement, wherein you would you may write requirement like the system should improve performance. Now what do you mean by improve performance? Performance improvement should be having a necessary criteria that should be quantifiable. For example, improving performance means the page should be loaded within 5 seconds, or if I am requesting something to the system, the response should be coming to me within 10 seconds. So that is something which is feasible to implement. If you write the requirement like the system should be having a high performance standard or it should improve performance, so those are the requirements which is not feasible to implement. So you need to take care of that part as well. Then there are other properties like necessary. Now necessary is like is the requirement actually needed in the particular system. So when we actually start writing the requirement, the very first question that we ask to the stakeholder, what is the need of this particular requirement? Is it even necessary? Why we ask that particular question? Because there's no point implementing a particular feature which is never used by any user. If we see any modern day application, there are hundreds of features which are never used in a particular system. So those are nothing but your unnecessary requirements which would add to the unnecessary efforts, and it wouldn't give the expected return on investment. So you need to understand from your business, from your customer, that whatever we are trying to understand, is it necessary to implement? Then comes your prioritization part. So prioritization, I have already explained you. So ranking is one of the way you can prioritize the requirement. Then we have the Moscow principle, by which we can prioritize a particular set of requirements. So that is thing. Now, when it comes to necessary part, if you consider in today's system, there are, according to a statistics that I read in a recent article, a given system can be used maximum 75%. Now, when I say maximum 75%, it includes a list of features that are available in that particular system. Rest 25% features are never even used by any user. They are not even aware of that particular feature. Why? Because those are unnecessary requirements that plays no use in anyone's life. I mean, they are just there for that particular reason, else not. So you have to avoid such kind of requirements when you are interacting with your business stakeholder, because development team is someone who would blindly code what you have given them. But you as a business analyst needs to understand how significant is that particular requirement, and do we actually need this particular requirement. Like in my personal experience, I have questioned the business many times that we do even need this particular requirement, and it is then when they realize that they don't actually need this requirement and they scrap their expectation. So business would come to you with different expectation, but you being a business representative, a business analyst, need to take a necessary call on understanding whether the requirement is necessary or not. Then comes your requirement management part. So you would essentially be managing the requirement with any of these tools. These are just indicative tools. There are many other tools. We have TFS, Jira, IBM Rational to manage our requirement. So we define the requirement, baseline that particular requirement, then we link the requirement to each other. We evaluate the proposed changes to requirement. We approve and incorporate requirement changes, and then we track the priority or degree of that particular requirement. So we have a dedicated session on requirements management. So this is just a high level view of requirement management. So to show you how this look like, so this is something I had created. So you can have your requirement in this particular fashion, wherein you would be, this is actually written in agile context. These are the modules, these are the stories, and these are your actual requirements use cases. Every requirement use case has a different unique ID, the requirement type, whether it's functional, non-functional. If there is any relation to other requirement, then you have to relate it with the other requirements. Then you have to write their statuses, analysis statuses, development statuses, complexity, sprint, and so on. Now this blue line is your requirement attribute, okay, and this is something your requirement properties, which is the actual requirement. So we just saw how to write a proper requirement, what all things we need to follow. Now, how requirements are originated. Now we understood the process, we understood what is need, we understood what is requirement, what are requirement attributes, what are requirement properties. Now we will need to understand how the requirements are originated. Now there could be n number of reasons from where your requirements would be originated. It could be a user originating a particular requirement. It could be a particular system from where requirements are originated. It could be a technical requirement. It could be a stakeholders requirement. It could be a business requirement, or it could be a regulatory requirement. Now, what's the difference between user and stakeholder? Can anyone tell me?
Users are like basically the employees that are using it,
Mm-hmm.
and stakeholders can be like the management or the high position people in an organization.
Yes, absolutely. So what essentially here stakeholder and user means, let's say we Google is developing their Android system. Now Google management team are the stakeholder of developing that particular Android system. Now who are the user? Users are like me and you, who are consuming that particular operating system and giving our feedback, like this is very tricky to use, or this is very complex to use, the screen is not aligned properly. So these are some of the requirements which user would give, and the end-to-end core requirement management is something the stakeholder would give. So these are the 6 ways by which the requirements are originated to a particular system or a particular project. Now when we move further, there are certain categorization of requirement. So we have various category when it comes to requirement. So the very important category is your functional requirement. So functional requirement is like what the actual system would do when your requirement would be implemented. Like the example which we saw, the HR management system. So all the requirements therein were functional requirement, wherein we had the business rules, then we have the administrative function, authentication, authorization level, and so on. So these are the typical guidelines which you need to include as part of your functional requirement. All your business rules, all your transaction adjustment cancellation related to a particular project, your administrative function, your authentication, your authorization level, your audit tracking, your external interfaces, certification requirement, reporting requirement, historical data, or any legal or regulatory requirement would be part of your functional requirement. So functional requirement are something your functional users would give you, the business users who are actually using that particular application, or who are the people who are sponsoring that particular application. I mean the stakeholder on behalf of the organization who is funding or sponsoring that particular engagement or initiative. They would be giving you a functional requirement. Now then there is non-functional requirement. Now non-functional requirement are supporting requirement which would support your functional requirement. When these requirements are coded in a particular system, developed in a particular system, it has to go through a certain set of parameters or certain set of tests that needs to happen in a particular system, like performance, scaling, capacity, availability, reliability, recoverability, maintainability, serviceability, security, environmental, data integrity, usability, and interoperability. So these category of requirement are part of your non-functional requirement. Now a very interesting thing to note about non-functional requirement is like this requirement are always measured basis on certain parameters. So if I say performance, so the performance would be measured on a parameter like the system should be up and running at least 21 hours a day, and it should not be down during the peak operation hours. So that is the measurement for validating your performance requirement. Same thing for scalability requirement. The system should be scalable. If there is load on a particular server, then the load needs to be distributed. Now this distribution has to be measured in terms of scalability. Like if you see a load in a particular server in, let's say, Europe region, then immediately the load needs to be distributed to the US region or to China region and so on. Now what are the number of requests that you are receiving for a particular server, what is the bandwidth your server is consuming. So those sort of requirements are captured in your non-functional requirement in a measurable and quantifiable manner, which is not the case with your functional requirement. So functional requirement is more from a functional standpoint. Their acceptance criteria or measurement criteria would be from a functional standpoint, the functionality standpoint. For example, if I say administrative function, so which are the roles in administrative function? Admin, user, senior user, super user, and so on. So it won't be having any such quantification. Rather, it would have a categorization based on the functionality. Then comes your transitional requirement. Now what are transitional requirement? So this category of requirement are there for a temporary period of time. They are not available all the time in a particular project. Let's say you are migrating from a legacy system to a newer version of the system. So the migration process from a legacy system to newer system would be captured with the help of your transitional requirement. What are the data elements that we would be transferring from older system to newer system? Now once the transfer is complete, we would no longer need this requirement. So these are transitional in nature and they would exist in your system for a temporary period of time. After the purpose is solved, after the system is migrated from an older system to a newer system, the requirement would end over there and those transitional requirement would be retired. Then comes your implicit requirement. Now implicit requirement are something that customer would never ever tell you. Now why they would never ever tell you? That's the reason why you see in today's job market, most of the companies are looking for BA who is having domain experience or who is having specific area of specialization. Now essentially the specialization is in that particular domain, whether it's insurance, banking, or if you consider the technical domain, whether it's Salesforce or Informatica or any XYZ domain. So this is the reason why they are asking for specialization. Now what happens essentially in a particular project is that whenever they are hiring a specialized business analyst in a particular project, they expect that the business analyst would ask the specific questions which are related to that particular domain. And if there is something that the customer hasn't informed or hasn't clearly articulated in a particular document, then the BA should be in a position to understand and interpret those implicit aspect of that particular requirement. Now, for example, if I have to consider the insurance part, so the requirement was like you need to validate the address using Pitney Bowes integration. Okay, now it is just an example. Now my business gave me a requirement like validate every insured address using Pitney Bowes integration. Now Pitney Bowes is a service provider uh, who validates the address and return it back whether the address is a valid address or not. Now I asked my business that what are the fields that you would be using to validate this address. They said we would be using two fields, address line 1 and address line 2. While address line 1 would be a mandatory field, address line 2 would be an optional field. And then we would be having city, state and zip code field. So this is the requirement I got from my customer. This is the explicit set of requirement I got from my customer. Now, I being a business analyst, I know that there is something else also part of address. Now, if you consider address line 1, it could be something like 123 Main Street. Then if you consider the address line 2, the business clearly said that it would be an optional address. It may exist, it may not exist. Now imagine a scenario. Let's say it is an apartment. Now apartment would be like this, SPP apartment. Now an apartment would be having different, n number of flats within it. In other words, they say it as unit numbers. So unit numbers are nothing but your flat number. Now my business gave me only these four requirements. They haven't told me that to analyze this particular requirement. Now when I verified this particular requirement, I saw that if someone enters the apartment and the apartment has different unit numbers or different flat numbers associated with it, and I am pulling a a violation report for that particular uh, uh, location. Violation report as in if any loss has happened to that particular um, location which is entered by the insured. And I come to know that his flat number, let's say 402, had a loss associated with it. 3 or 4 years down the line, he had a fire in that particular unit number 402. Now I go back to my customer and say, don't you think this is an important aspect that you need to provide? Instead of making it optional, we should make it as mandatory. Because if there is a loss happening at the units, the flats, then how would you capture it? So that is where the customer came into action and they modified this particular requirement. So when you are working as a business analyst or companies who are hiring specialized business analysts in specific domain, they expect the business analyst to do necessary research and development in that particular area. And if there are any implicit requirement which customer hasn't explained you upfront, you analyze it amongst you or your peers and go back to the customer and question them. This requirement has to be like this, why it is like that, so that it helps customer have a broader vision or broader picture in terms of understanding the requirement. So these are your implicit requirement. Now what are explicit requirement then? Explicit requirement are the requirements which customer gives you upfront, like the example we saw wherein we got the necessary set of requirement explicitly given to us by the customer. Then comes the sixth category of requirement, that is called as latent requirement. So this requirement are more from a behavior perspective, like the material design example I gave you. That is essentially part of your latent requirement, which is heavily influenced by your user experience and user interface. Like I should be able to make a payment within one click. So PayPal has their tagline that just click on that PayPal button and enter your details and you should be able to complete your payment. So that is more of a user experience and user interface context, like how what I would say flexible the users are in terms of consuming or using the requirements or using the features of that particular system. So you have to think from that perspective, and they are part of your latent requirements. Then you have solution requirement. So solution requirement are essentially a combination of functional and non-functional requirements. So if someone asks you, did you do the solutioning of the requirement, you can say yes, I have done, if you have completed your functional and non-functional requirement. Then comes your business requirement. So business requirements are from a business standpoint, and they are at a very high level. So essentially your business requirement document would be having your business requirement, the high level requirements which are given by the business, like what is their expectation out of this particular system. That is something you would be writing in business requirement. Then you have stakeholder requirement. Now we know who are the stakeholder. So stakeholder are the person who are primarily accountable for giving requirement to us from a particular context of a project. So we should be able to gather the stakeholder requirements. Then we have domain requirement. Now this is very important. Now domain requirement is like if you are working in any BFSI domain, banking, financial service and insurance domain, they have their own regulatory norms to follow. They have their own algorithms in place, and they have to comply to a specific compliance and regulatory body. So these are the requirements that you need to handle very specifically, because for for a given day they may consider that they are unable to do any business, but doing wrong business is something that they cannot expect. They may choose that we don't get any business for a particular day, but we cannot do illegal business, because the domain itself is very sensitive, the banking, financial services and insurance domain. Any flaw in compliance, in regulatory or in algorithm would completely throw them out of the market. So you need to be very careful when you are writing domain requirement. So in insurance perspective, if you ask me, so the domain requirement could be their business algorithm, wherein they charge the service fee, they charge the uh, premium calculation, proration. So these are something which are specific to the domain, which the state insurance regulatory provides them. They cannot bypass their rule. So if there is any issue with them, they are uh, out of the business if someone reported it. Then comes your UI requirements, wherein you specify the user interface part. So this is not similar to the latent requirement. Latent requirement is something which is user experience in collaboration with user interface, and this UI requirement is the screen prototypes that you create for the customer, the basic UI, not the intuitive or material design UI, hi-fi UI of that sort. Okay, any questions, anyone so far? Now we saw requirement elicitation, we saw requirement gathering. Now in requirement gathering, we have the analysis and design. Now when we consider elicitation as a particular phase in requirement analysis or an activity in our requirement analysis and design knowledge area, there are certain phases in elicitation. Now what are those phases? There are essentially these four phases in requirement elicitation. First, we discover the requirement. So whatever interaction that we do with our customer, or whatever uh, coordination that we do, whatever meetings or interviews we conduct with the stakeholder, that is something is part of your discovering your particular requirement. So we are essentially brainstorming the requirement at this point of time. After that, it is followed by requirement classification and organization. So the classification that we saw, the 10 to 12 categories, we need to classify the requirement in that particular fashion, whether it's a functional requirement, non-functional requirement, implicit, explicit, or any XYZ category of requirement, and we have to organize them, like which requirement is related to another requirement. So if we say a functional requirement, there would be 10 functional requirements that you have written for a particular feature, for a particular capability in a particular system. So we need to link those 10 functional requirements with each other. So that is called as organization of the requirement. We first discover, then we classify and organize the requirement. After that, we have to do the prioritization and negotiation. Now, prioritization, as we know, we do the ranking technique to prioritize the requirement, like which is the top ranked feature, which is the least ranked feature, or which is the must have, could have, should have, would have feature. And after that, we do the negotiation. We ask different stakeholders that what is your viewpoint around the priority of this requirement. And after that, we do a accumulation of it and we associate a rank based on it. So that is the third phase in that particular requirement elicitation process. And after that, we specify the requirement. Now, what is specification here? Specification is detailing the requirement. This is the place wherein we start actually creating the design document. Now, what are design documents? Anything like if we are doing a data modeling activity, we would create a data dictionary, or we would end up creating physical schema, physical design, logical design, or conceptual design. If we are doing a UML modeling, we would be creating the use cases, UML diagram, state chart diagram, activity diagram. If we are creating UI modeling, then we would end up creating UI screen mockups and prototypes. If we are doing process modeling, we would end up creating process flows and workflows. So depending on the nature of modeling technique, we would specify or detail out the designing elements associated to the requirement, UI, process, or your data, whatever the aspect it could be. So these are the four phases that are part of your requirement elicitation process. After that, if we see the process one by one, we see the requirement discovery is like interacting with or gathering the requirement from the stakeholder about the required system and existing system if it exists. So there could be two cases: either the system already exists, an older version of the system, and we are gathering the requirement to the newer version of the system, or there may be a case that a system may not exist altogether. So in this context, we would be using some of the techniques like interviews, scenarios, prototypes, and so on. Prototypes are nothing but your UI screens and mockups, which you prepare and show it to your customers throughout the discovery process. Now here we gather and understand the requirement from a stakeholder perspective, what it is. And it is essentially not that easy process, because if you are dealing with multiple stakeholders, every stakeholder would be having a different stand for a particular feature or a particular functionality. So you, being a business analyst, have to streamline their expectation and resolve the conflicts that are arising out of their perception. So the best approach is to rank the requirement basis on their perception, and then you have to select a priority. So this is the final outcome. Do we proceed with this particular approach or not? So that is one thing you do in requirement discovery phase. Now in discovery phase, there are different techniques that we use. So one of the technique is called as interview technique, wherein you ask both open-end questions and close-ended question to the respective stakeholder who is part of that particular meeting. So close-ended questions are the questions which are predefined, like what is the expectation out of the system, or what is the business benefit out of the system. So it's a predefined set of questions that you need to ask. An open-ended question is like you are brainstorming them, like do we really need to consider this requirement? If this requirement is not in place, what would happen? So those are open-ended questions, wherein you try to understand the requirement from a stakeholder standpoint, whether it is feasible or not to include that particular requirement in that particular system. So you would be using another technique called as use case and scenario apart from interview technique. So use case and scenario is like you would be thinking about a system from an user perspective. For example, if an admin user login, what should be his privileges in that particular system? What all areas he would be able to manage and handle in that particular system? If it is a regular customer, what would be his privileges? So you would think about the requirement from an user standpoint. If we had to consider our HR management system, If a candidate log in into a system, how the system flow would be. If a HR manager log in into the system, how the system flow would be. If a hiring manager log in into the system, how the system flow would be. So they are essentially the users who are having a use case, who are which is driven by a particular scenario. So scenario are nothing but your condition, and use cases are the cases of the user or different types of user who would be in that particular condition when using that particular system. So these are the two techniques that you would be using in requirements discovery phase. Then comes the next phase, that is requirement classification and organization. Like I already told you, we would classify the requirement out of those 10 to 11 categories that we just saw, and we have to organize them, that is link them with each other, like which requirement is dependent on that, which requirement is not dependent on that. Now there is something called as functional decomposition when it comes to writing the requirement. Now what is functional decomposition is like you are having a high level functionality, like we have the requirement to build an HR management system. So that is our high level functionality. Now we drill down that requirement into 10 to 12 steps. So what we essentially did, we decomposed the system to understand and have a better visibility around what is needed. So in software world, when you are working as a business analyst, you need to you would often come across this particular term called as functional decomposition, or decomposing a particular system, wherein you have to drill down from high level requirement to low level requirement which are implementable by your development team. Next phase is your requirement prioritization and negotiation. Like I said, you need to set the priority and negotiate with the stakeholder in order to determine which is the highest ranking feature and which is the lowest ranking feature. And eventually you would specify the requirement by creating different design artifacts or design documents pertaining to that particular requirement. Essentially, you would be detailing out the requirement. So functional specification document is a low-level document that you prepare in requirement specification phase during requirement analysis. Any questions, anyone so far? Okay. Now, how do we write the requirement? What are the approaches in terms of writing the requirement? So there are various approaches by which we can write the requirement. First is your natural language way, wherein we write the requirement in sentence format. Very simple sentences like the system shall be able to do so, the system shall be able to do this and that thing. Then comes the structured natural language way of writing the requirements, wherein you would provide field level information, like if it is an customer field, what should be the requirement for that customer field, what is the capability or what is the functionality that you need to incorporate in the customer field. For example, if you are having a first name and last name, you should always be accepting the alphabets, and the limit would be 14 characters or 15 characters. So those are structured. Then comes your design description languages, which is not used at this point of time in most of the projects, because this is more from a programming language standpoint wherein you write the requirement. If you are aware, there is something called a pseudocode. So pseudocode are something that are specified with the help of design description language, wherein you write the requirement, if this then that, if this then that. So the loops which you are using in programming, the if else loop or do while loop or for each loop, you have to write the requirement in those formats. So of late it has been realized that this category of requirement is not that much feasible to understand, so people are not using that extensively in specifying the requirement these days. But yes, this is also one of the way how you could write the requirement. Next comes your graphical notation. Now, graphical notation are nothing but your UML diagrams or the process flows or the sequence diagram that you attach with your functional specification document. So, graphical notation requirement are the ideal way to capture the requirement in today's landscape, because people do not have that much time to read through those 100 lines of textual format requirement. So instead of writing 100 lines of requirement, if you put the requirement in a graphical format, like we just saw the HR management system process flow, if we would have put it in a graphical manner, it would have been very easy to comprehend rather than reading through all those 11 to 12 steps. So this is being extensively used and is one of the way of writing the requirement. Then comes your mathematical specification. So mathematical specification are not used in all the projects, but yes, in certain industries, if you consider the banking and insurance industry, when it comes to write the algorithm in order to design a particular system, we tend to use mathematical specification for writing the requirement. Like if the age of that particular user, a particular insured, or the particular person who is willing to consider insurance is between 11 to 20 to 25 years, the rate would be different. If it is between to 25 to 30 years his age, then the rates would be different, the premium would be different. So in those scenario, we can use mathematical specification to write our requirements. Now if we consider example by example, so natural language specification requirement looks something like that. This is the dummy format or the blueprint wherein we write the A or the actor shall do something by how, explain how the user can trigger this feature in order to, so that why you need to explain the benefit of the objective of the requirement. For example, a system, here system is the actor, shall allow the user to register. Register is the action, do something by entering. Entering is how, their username and password, and in order to why, that is get an access to the system. So we have the actor, system, we have the action, register, we have the information, that is entering their username and password, and we have the final objective like why, in order to get an access to the system. So this is how you write a requirement in natural language specification. Next, if we see the structured language specification, this is how it looks like. You would define the name of the function, you would define the description, you would write the input, you would write the source, you would write the output, you would write the destination, the action, what it does, what it requires, what are the precondition, what are the post condition, and what are the side effects. So you can specify it in the form of use case in structured specification language. Structured language specification, whatever use case you would be having. So this is nothing but your structure, and you would go about writing your requirement following this particular structure. So this is also a very good example wherein you write the requirement in today's system. So the earlier example was something that was followed in earlier stages during the traditional approach, and this was also part of traditional approach, but people are still following this approach for writing the requirement, which gives a detailed understanding of what is the requirement. Now let us understand what is a software requirement specification. Now we have the high level document called as business requirement document. Now this software requirement specification or functional specification document or low level design document are all meaning the same thing or all indicate the same thing. Okay, now these are essentially the subset of BRD or high level design document. Now BRD would be having always the requirement at a very high level, which are comprehensible by the business user, whereas software requirement specification is something that is designed to cater the needs of the development team or the technical user, wherein you go a level deep and detail out the requirement in a detailed format for your technical audience or the audience who would like to understand the requirement from a system context, like how it would be implemented in a particular system. For that reason, we create software requirement specification. So like I said, it's a description of the software system to be developed. It is modeled after business requirement specification. Once we create the BRS or BRD, we start creating software requirement specification. So it lays out the functional and non-functional requirement that needs to be included with the help of your use cases, and describe user interaction and the software must provide. So remember, there are two things when you are writing a requirement. One is specify and one is describe. Now what's the meaning of specify and what's the meaning of describe? Now when you are writing a business requirement document or high level requirement document, you specify the requirement. Specify as in you write the high level requirement in one liner or one sentences and so on. Now only specifying the requirement is not sufficient. You have to describe the requirement in detail. So that is something this software requirement specification or your functional specification document solve is trying to achieve over here. Now has list sufficient and necessary requirements for the project development. So these are pretty much self-comprehensible. So whenever we have a it's not like whenever we have a need. Ultimately every project has this particular document, essentially these two mandate documents, business requirement document and software requirement specification. So you cannot do away with this. These are the two important documents that you need to create. Now my question to you people is, uh, should we have only one software specification document for a given project, or which is linked to a BRD, or there can be multiple software requirement specification, one or multiple for a given BRD?
I'm not sure, but I think there should be just one to avoid confusion.
No, there would be multiple software requirement specification, because when we create a business requirement document, and if it is a system like we saw the HR management system, okay, so HR management system would be having different users to interact to it. For example, it would be candidate, it would be HR team, it would be HR manager, it would be hiring manager. Not everything can be specified, described in one single specification document. You have to create separate specification document to handle all this different category of user. So in most of the project in real time scenario, you would be having multiple software requirement specification for a given BRD, because BRD itself is a 200-page document, 200 to 250 pages document. And if you go about describing those 200 to 250 pages document, the outcome would be another 1,000 page of document. So instead of having 1,000 pages of document, what they do, they classify the requirement in a particular category, mostly basis on the module, and they create software specification for each of those modules. So there would be multiple software requirement specification for a given BRD. Now, what are the characteristics of software requirement specification or functional specification document? The same thing, it has to be complete. The requirement must be complete. What is the meaning of completeness? That is, it means that all the required information to implement, read, code the requirement. So there is no need to assume anything. So this is a requirement of example of incomplete requirement. In case of an error, the system must exit gracefully. So this is an incomplete requirement. What is the complete requirement for it? In case of an error, the system must show an error page to the user with the following message: oops, we have encountered some error and working on it. In the while, you can go to the home page and try other option and write to us about what were you doing, so that we can help. Our email ID is support@abc.com. So you should avoid writing requirement in this format. In case of an error, the system must exit gracefully. What's gracefully? This word doesn't have any meaning. Instead, you write the complete requirement in this format. It should display an error message, and the message content would be this. Now, next is the requirement needs to be consistent. For example, if you read through these two requirements, like the invoices will be granted and sent automatically based on the milestones achieved, with a copy to the accounts department. Now the accounts department will generate the invoice based on milestones achieved and will send it to the customer. So both are essentially meaning the same thing, but the words placement are different. So that is nothing but your duplication of requirement or an inconsistent requirement. So either you keep this or keep this. So only one requirement should be included in the software requirement specification instead of both. So the development team would get confused because ultimately both the sentences mean the same thing. So your requirement has to be consistent and it should exist only once in your particular requirement document, not multiple times with different words mean ultimately meaning the same thing. Then comes the feasible requirement. If you see an infeasible requirement example, the developer software must be reliable and should not crash. Now what's the meaning of reliable? Then the developed software must be free of defects. A software cannot, at any point of time in any software system that you develop in the entire world, it cannot be free of defect. So this is not a feasible requirement that you have captured. So there is no software which is free of defect. Instead, both of these requirements are not eligible to be part of SRS at the first place. Reliable and free of defect doesn't make any sense. So these requirements are not feasible for development team to implement. So you should not write these kind of requirement in your software requirement specification. Then comes your unambiguous requirement. So for example, all the screen in the system must load quickly. What is quickly? Quickly doesn't mean anything. And what is the unambiguous requirement for that context? All the screens in the system must load within 8 seconds. So like I said, when we are dealing with non-functional requirement, we need to quantify the measurement criteria. Like if it is loading, if an event is happening in a particular system, then what is the timeline for occurring that event? So the system must load but within 8 seconds. So this is an unambiguous requirement. So you have to avoid writing unambiguous requirement. Then comes testable requirement, whether the requirement you wrote is testable or not. So the example for untestable requirement is the system must be user friendly. Now what the hell is user friendly? User friendly doesn't make any sense over here. So you would be writing the testable requirement as the user interface should be menu driven on the top of the website along with site index. A tooltip for all the text boxes must be provided. So you are essentially describing the requirement in detail rather than writing this ambiguous statement. Next is modifiable requirement. Now what is modifiable requirement? Modifiable requirement is like at any given point of time, if your stakeholder comes to you and they would ask you to modify a particular requirement, then the way you have written the requirement would be in such a position that you can instantly modify the requirement. For example, the address line example I gave you, if my end customer comes to you and comes to me and asks me to make the address line 2 also as mandatory, then the requirement is in modifiable state. I already have the address line 2 captured in my requirement. Instead of optional, I would create as mandatory. So that is something I modified in the particular requirement. So your software requirement specification has to be in a state wherein the requirements are modified. Now we saw what are the characteristics of SRS, what is an SRS. Now we will see what are the contents of an SRS. So this is how your SRS contents are organized. It would be having an introduction, it would be having a purpose, document convention, intended audience who would be using that particular software requirement specification. It would be having the project scope taken directly from the business requirement document, references also taken from business requirement document. It would be having an overall description, the actual project or product description, the operating environment, the design and implementation constraint specified to be comprehensive enough to be taken up by the development team, the assumptions and dependencies, the system features, the external interface requirement, the user interface, the hardware interfaces, the software interfaces, other non-functional requirements, performance requirements, safety requirements, and security requirements. So essentially, anything that describes your system in detail should go under software requirement specification. Now these sections are very indicative. Every organization, every project would be having sections plus or minus. So there could be additional sections to it. There could be something that may not absolutely be part of this particular contents of SRS. Now, are BRD and SRD same? No. SRS or functional specification document is a subset of BRD. And what are the modeling techniques needed by a business analyst to prepare a system requirement specification? Like I said, we would be creating UI screens and mockups using UI modeling. We would be creating use cases by using use case modeling technique. We would be creating process flows by using process modeling technique, and we would be creating data flow diagram, conceptual model, physical model, logical model, and your data dictionary with the help of database modeling technique. Now, before we go to the underlying technique for elicitation, let me show you a sample software requirement specification. Now, this is a template of software requirement specification. So your software requirement specification would be having a Word document like this, wherein you would be having your project name. Again, here you would be having the versioning of your software requirement specification, like we saw yesterday for our business case. Then who is the author? In our case, we being the business analyst would be the author for this software requirement specification. Which is the company that is creating this software requirement specification? What is the date created? Date on which the software requirement specification document was created. After that, you would be having your table of contents. Like you would be having the introduction section, the overall description, the system features, the external interface requirement, and the other non-functional requirements. And then, like the document history, we would be having the revision history. If you are sending this requirement document for approval to your business stakeholder, so if some of the stakeholder feels that at this point I need some revision, they would be doing the necessary revision by writing their name, the date they have revised that particular section or particular comments, and what is the reason for their change, and they would give a new version to it. For example, if the version over here is 1.0, they would give the version as 1.1, and that has to reflect over here. It should be 1.1, 1.2, or whatever version it has been approved or being undergoing through an approval process. Now, if we explore the contents, we would see we first start with the purpose. Now, what is the purpose of this software requirement specification? Now, like I said, there could be multiple software requirement specification document emerging out of a business requirement document. So, what is this business requirement, software requirement specification document's purpose is? If we have splitted it in different software requirement specification, what is the purpose of this requirement specification, not the other one? Other one's purpose would be defined in their individual SRS. So you have to specify it. After that, what are the document convention? Now, what are document convention? Document convention are the abbreviation that you use throughout your document. For example, if you say payment gateway integration, so payment gateway integration, the sentence would come most often throughout this document. So what you would write, PGI stands for payment gateway integration, and rest places wherein you feel like writing the payment gateway integration, you simply write PGI. So those kind of things you could mention in document convention. Then comes your intended audience and reading suggestion. So who all would be reading that particular system requirement specification? You have to write the intended audience, like users, business stakeholder, their name, their designation, and so on. Then you have to define the project scope. What is the scope of the software requirement specification in conjunction with the project work, the entire project work? What's the purpose it solves? You have to specify that. For example, in our HR management system case, this software requirement specification deals with how an HR would be handling the workflow of a system. So you have to write the scope over here. After that, if you have taken any external references like Wikipedia, or you have reached out to your domain competency group, you can write those references over here. If you want, you can also attach some of the Excel demographics information, charts, process flows, and so on, if you have taken any references. If not, then leave it. After you have done with section 1, you go with section 2, wherein you have to describe the overall perspective of the product, like what this particular system would do and what is expected out of that particular system. Then you would list out all the features as in your features that were listed in your business requirement document. So let's say your business requirement document had 50 features, and this software requirement specification is only dealing with 15 out of 50 features. So you have to list down those 15 features and describe them in detail. After that, you have to outline the user classes and characteristics. So who are the user that would be using this software requirement specification or this particular system? What is their frequency of usage? You have to write those things. Then what are the operating condition? What is there any minimum software requirement needs for executing this particular project? You would be writing that in this section. Then comes your design and implementation constraint. If there is any third-party systems, dependency for development. For example, if you are developing a SharePoint portal, now in that SharePoint portal, if it's a dependency from Microsoft side to provide the upgrade or the updates to your portal via online or offline, then you have to mention it over there that there's a dependency of such third-party vendors. Then you go about documenting your requirement, if there are any user manuals or online help or tutorials that you have created for better comprehension of this document, you can write it over here. Then you have to specify your other assumption and dependencies, not from a vendor perspective like we saw over here, design and implementation perspective, but here from a functional perspective, if there are any dependencies for a particular system. Now this is the place wherein you start your actual requirement description, wherein you write feature by feature description, like feature 1, what is the description, what is the response, what are the functional requirement, and list down all the requirements. Then you go by feature 2 and so on. So this is the place wherein you go about specifying the feature by feature requirement for a particular system. Then comes your external interface requirement. Whatever UI screen or prototypes that you create for a particular system, you go about by writing your user interface requirement over here. Essentially the screen flows and mockups, and describe those screen flows and mockups, why it would be used, it would be used, and so on. And if there are any hardware interfaces, you can write it over here. If there are software interfaces, then you can write it over here. Now what are the interfaces? Interfaces are nothing but your communication medium by which one screen communicates to another screen, or one machine communicates to another machine. So that communication is often termed as interface in business analysis. Now if there is an communication happening between the interfaces, for example, you have integrated a payment gateway. So payment gateway would be your Visa, MasterCard, or American Express, and so on. So those kind of thing you can specify over here, like how your system would be interacting with the Visa, MasterCard, or American card system. Essentially it would be interacting with the help of message passing mechanism and response request way, but you have to specify over here with the help of your technical team. You can always get help from your technical team when you are dealing with any such non-functional requirement, wherein you have to understand the third-party system, how it things work. After that, same thing you have to follow for non-functional requirement, wherein you would write performance requirement, safety requirement, security requirement, software quality attributes, and if there are any other requirements, you go about specifying this other than functional and non-functional requirement. After that, if there is any appendix, glossary, analysis, issue list, then you can go about listing them in this particular software requirement specification, or also called as functional specification document in some of the cases. Now this was about the template. Now we will see an actual sample. Now this is a software requirement specification created for this particular system. If you see, the things are already mentioned in it. What is the purpose of the system? What is the scope of the system? How the glossary look like? What are the references they have taken? The overview of the documentation, how to read through this particular document, the overall description of the system with the help of UML use case, what are the functional requirement, the use case for it described, then the other requirement, the use case for it, then the other requirement, the use case for it, whatever requirement it has, all the use cases are specified in this sample document. And they do have some non-functional requirement as well, which is mentioned over here. Then they have created a separate use cases over here in textual format, wherein they have mentioned the priority, triggering condition, precondition, basic path, alternate path, post condition, acceptance path, other, and references, and all those things. So this is how your actual functional specification document look like. And if there is a non-functional requirement, then you have to specify those non-functional requirement in this particular format. So you can go through this particular document, the sample and the template. It is already uploaded in that particular portal. You can download it and verify it. But although the assignment for today is to create a software requirement specification, but all the elements has not yet been covered in our program. So what you could do at this point of time, the best is go through this template and try to read through this particular sample, how the software requirement specification looks like. And when we complete the UML modeling, database analysis session and process modeling session, that is the time when you start writing your functional specification document. At this point of time, you can fill the functional requirement list and non-functional requirement list basis on our project work. So just go through this two document. It is already there in the portal, and if any questions, let me know.
Hey, Sunil, under which section? Is it the business analyst templates or
It's in under templates.
templates? Okay.
Oh, sorry, not under templates. It's under that assignment section, assignment download section.
Assignment section.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So now we would quickly go through some of the underlying techniques for elicitation. Like we saw few techniques for business case yesterday, like what was it? Potter's 5-4, SWOT analysis, interview, brainstorm, and focus group. So there are some of the techniques that are used for elicitation as well. We'll quickly go through them. So these are some of the.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. I have one question.
Mhm.
So you said like we keep updating the software requirement specification. So is there any case where like if there is multiple SRS, they are connected to each other and the changes which we make in one will affect the other ones?
Yes,
So how are
there are
those things
cases.
updated and how do you track that? Like,
That is tracked using your traceability. So there is a different matrix called as requirement traceability matrix. So requirement traceability matrix could essentially be linked with all your system requirement specification, your high level BRD, and all the individual requirement. So you being a business analyst needs to do the impact analysis if one SRS is impacting the other SRS. So that is something we would be covering in our upcoming section when I would explain you about the requirement traceability matrix, probably in the requirements lifecycle management section. So this is how the process works to answer your question.
okay.
Okay, so we have these number of techniques that are commonly used in requirement elicitation. We have brainstorming session, then we have document analysis, focus group, interface analysis, interviews, observation, prototyping, requirement workshops, and surveys and questionnaire. So some of the techniques we have already seen in our yesterday's session, like brainstorming, focus group, and interviews. Let us see few more techniques. Now, a very common technique every business analyst use when they are new to the project is called as document analysis. Now, what is document analysis? Document analysis is a technique wherein you tend to analyze the document which are already there in the project or already existing in this system. So you tend to perform the tend to review and research your findings in and around those documents. For example, if you are tagged to a banking domain project, so you are new to that particular project, you do not know anything about that particular project. So what's the first technique that should you be approaching towards is your document analysis. You go through the documents which are of similar nature, which are of course available with your domain competency group. Ask them for the document relevant to the particular project, go through that document and gain a initial understanding of the environment or the ask the business is trying to give you, or the requirement the business is trying to give you. Because if you don't do your research and homework and directly start interviewing your customer would get freaked out, and they would say, well, this person hasn't done his homework correctly. So it's very important that you do a thorough document analysis before going for interview session or workshops or any XYZ session with your business stakeholder. So document analysis is performed in 3 stages: the prepare stage, the review stage, and the wrap up stage. In prepare stage, what you would do, you would identify which are the suitable documents that are relevant to your research. So you reach out to your domain competency group and they would give you hundreds of documents. You cannot go through those hundreds of documents. You need to identify which is the relevant document that you need to go through. So you have to prepare essentially for that particular phase. Now, obvious next question would be, how do I identify which is relevant document to me or not? So for that, in domain competency group, there are always senior consultant or expert available to you who can guide you through this particular process. Like, out of these 100 documents, which are the most important document you should go through before attending this particular interview or workshop session. So that is the guidance they can provide you. So once the preparation stage is over, the next stage is review stage, wherein you review the material. Whatever relevant notes are there, you can take the relevant notes and list up your follow-up question for the stakeholders. So you have gone through the documents now which are provided by your competency group. Now you have to take some notes, like after this question has been answered, what should be my follow-up question? So this is more of a preparedness stage, the review stage and the prepare stage. After that, there should be a wrap-up stage wherein you would review notes with the stakeholder. Whatever notes you have taken so far till stage 2, you would ask those information and confirm it with the stakeholder whether this is what the way you want the system or the requirement to be modeled. If they say yes, then you would start organizing the requirement and ask them the follow-up questions that you have already prepared during your review stage. So document analysis is one of the key technique that you use as a business analyst when it comes to requirement elicitation. So these are some of the advantages of document analysis. Like it is useful when your stakeholder is unavailable or no longer with the organization. So this is a very interesting part. Now these projects, like I explained you the account concept yesterday's session. Now there could be a case, after all, we all are human and we work for a certain price for an organization. Now there may be a case that a particular key stakeholder resigns from an organization, and since he was the key stakeholder, he had all the accountability of managing the requirements and the documentation aspect. Now you are the new business analyst. How do you come to know that what all documents he has prepared, how the requirements was managed and what all the key roles he played in that particular project? So it's nothing but your document that he has prepared. So you can go through his document which he has prepared. You could gain yourself a baseline understanding of the existing requirement in that particular project. So this is the very important and useful thing to pick when it comes to document analysis. Next, it ensures that the analyst does not start from a blank page. Like I said, you should do a necessary homework before going to your business stakeholder. So it gives the necessary understanding to start with your interview session, the document analysis activity. And it also acts as a means of cross-checking requirement with other sources. So if there are any requirements that are pertaining to a particular project and existing, so you can cross-check those requirements with other project resources as well, because domain competency group would be having artifacts from different projects. You can compare 2 or 3 projects requirement of similar nature and um, uh, conclude your approach in terms of asking questions to your business stakeholders. Then there are certain disadvantages, like document analysis is limited to as is situation. Now in BRD there are 2 things, as is and to be. Now as is something, the current what I would say, the current situation of the system as it is working currently. And to be is something that would a proposed system, after change how the system would look like. So the document analysis always talks about as is, it never talks about to be situation. Now document usually needs to be updated to reflect current circumstances, so it's your responsibility as a business analyst to keep all the documents updated, whether it's functional spec or business spec or any technical spec. It's your responsibility to keep it current and up to date, and it can be time consuming to find out and shift through masses of information. Like I said, the documents would be having an information overload, so you need to streamline what is the important document or what are the important documents that you should go through within that span of time. Now these are essentially the list of document you go through when you conduct document analysis, like your business process documentation, functional spec, business rule documentation, organization structure, benchmarking studies, company memos, product reviews, contracts, customer suggestion feedback, and there are many more. So depending on the situation of the project, the need of the project, your list of selection would vary basis on what you review during your document analysis. Next technique is called as observation technique. Now this is a very interesting technique. Now what essentially happens in an entire typical project is like there are cases wherein people are very busy in their work. So especially the operation people who are dealing with end-to-end customer queries on daily basis, they are very busy people, and you being a business analyst are given an opportunity to gather requirement from them. Now since they are very busy and their time is precious, how would you gather requirement from them? Because you are not in a position to get even 30 minutes from them to conduct an interview session. So what you do follow an observation technique. Now observation techniques happens in 2 modes, passive invisible mode and active visible mode. What is passive invisible mode is like, you don't ask any question to the operation guy, you just sit behind him and see what he does in the system. You see, let's say he is generating an invoice, so how he is generating an invoice, you don't disturb him, but you just observe him passively. And then there are other way by which observation is conducted, like you sit behind him, and when he interacts with the system, you ask him questions like why you clicked here, what is the significance of selecting this drop down, how these invoices are generated. You can ask the open-ended question to them. So observation is a very useful technique, essentially in a circumstances when your stakeholders are very busy and you are asked to gather requirement from them, especially the operation team. So just sit behind them and see what they are doing for 1 to 2 days and create your meeting notes, or ask them open question like why you did this action in that particular system. After you have gathered the requirement, document it and send it for approval to the appropriate business stakeholder. So this is very interesting technique that you use as a business analyst. Then comes your requirement workshop. So workshop is like your session which are conducted in maybe face to face, or maybe via call or video call, audio call, whatever it is. and you invite different people into that particular session. It could be development team, it could be QA team, it could be project manager, and gain their agreement on a particular situation. If you want to obtain official approval from everyone that this is how I have designed the document or describe the requirement in this particular functional spec, what is your thought process around it? So you create a you conduct a requirement workshop session wherein you uh, explain them the requirement end to end. The the development team, the quality assurance team, and the project manager. Now, basis on your walkthrough of the requirement, they would give their suggestion, and that is where you gain their agreement in a particular designing aspect. So these are some of the ground things that happens in a typical workshop. So whatever things needs to be discussed, you need to put it in your agenda while sending the meeting invite. Then participants must be split into multiple teams to get the discussion going, with each team representing a mix of different interests. For example, development team, QA team, and the project manager or management team. Then everyone has to be given a problem and statement to discuss, and what is their outcome of or what is their feedback in and around that particular situation or problem statement. So this is something that you do most often, probably twice or thrice a week, the JAD sessions, and they are very popular in software industry, which gives you an fair chance of evaluation for writing getting your requirement approved or walked through by them. The other name for requirement workshop in some cases in some organization are also called as specification review walkthrough, wherein you walk through your specification that you have written for with the development team and QA team. So they are also called as specification review walkthrough or requirements workshop. Now, fourth technique is your survey questionnaire. Here you do not ask in-person question. You do not conduct any face-to-face session. Instead, you create a list of questionnaire, a simple yes or no question, or a question like how would you rate this experience on a scale of 1 to 10. You would create a questionnaire and send it out to the different stakeholders. So basis on their response, you create a matrix, and depending on that matrix, you obtain the necessary needful information that you are looking for. So this is also one of the key technique when you are working in a project which is more from a data analysis standpoint, wherein massive amount of data is involved or is being processed via a system. Typically in e-commerce domain, you use this technique, survey questionnaire. So these are the key consideration while preparing a survey. Straightforward questions should be there. Each question should contribute to achieving the objectives of the study. Pre-test the questionnaire. Questionnaire should not take longer than 10 minutes. So it's a time boxed technique. So your question should not be beyond 10 minutes. And the most important question should be positioned at the beginning of the questionnaire. And questionnaires are best used for close-ended question. You cannot ask any open-ended question. You have to use a set of predefined questions for this, and ensure that question do not reflect any personal bias. So that is something you need to consider. So these are some of the advantages. The responses are faster, and when the participants numbers are very large, you can go with survey questionnaire. And the disadvantage is that when you feel that where the stakeholder is located and there is no guarantee they would provide all the necessary information, you can go with survey questionnaires. Now, final technique that we use in requirement and elicitation is the interface analysis. Now, interface analysis is something wherein your system is interacting with any third-party system. Like I gave you an example of payment gateway integration where we had a Visa, PayPal, or MasterCard system. How your system is interacting with another system, you have to deal with and start documenting the requirements in and around those systems, like via message passing. If message passing, how the sequence of messages happening, what you are sending, what you are receiving, all those kind of detailing you have to do when you conduct interface analysis session. So we have a very dedicated session to understand how and when to do interface analysis, and understand what are the integral components of interface analysis in upcoming session. So to summarize these all things we covered today, we identified the core elements of business analysis, like the input, output, the stakeholders, the processes, the effort, and so on. Then we identified the need for requirement analysis. We understood what is the difference between requirement and elicitation and requirement analysis. Then we understood the requirement analysis phases, like what are the typical phases in requirement analysis: the discovery phase, the organization and classification of requirement, then prioritizing and negotiation of the requirement, and then uh, designing all your requirement. Then we saw what's the difference between requirement attributes and properties, like the properties could be the simplicity of the requirement, or it could be ambiguity of the requirement, or it may be pertaining to testability of the requirement. Those all properties we saw. Then we saw some of the requirement management. We just touch based with it. We would having a dedicated session for it. Then we saw how the requirements are originated: user requirements, system requirement, then technical requirement. Then we saw the stakeholder requirement. Then we saw requirement categorization: what are functional requirement, what are non-functional requirement, what are implicit, explicit. So near about 10 to 11 categories we saw. Then we saw the phases in requirement elicitation as explained earlier: the discovery phase, the organization and categorization of the requirement, then the phase of your what was that, the third phase, prioritization of the requirement and describing of the requirement. Then we saw the requirement writing approaches with the help of simple language. Then we saw natural language specification. Then we saw your mathematical expression, those kind of things. Then we saw the software requirement specification, a sample and a template. We understood the characteristics of SRS. We saw which are good qualities of writing requirements, we saw which are the bad qualities of writing requirements. We saw the contents of the SRS, and we did some what I would say techniques walkthrough for requirement elicitation.